Warning, the following program has been rated T for truth.
You can't handle the truth!
Oh, we think you can. Welcome to the Naked Truth Report with your host, truth warrior and mythbuster Kethleen Wells. The place where we distinguish fact from fiction, where data is used to drive points home, and where Kethleen takes the position that Democrats and black politicians have destroyed black America. Welcome to the Naked Truth Report. Now, your host, Kethleen Wells.
Welcome, Truth Warriors and Mythbusters. I'm happy that you've joined me today, subsequent to Super Tuesday. Well, last week, what did I do? We looked at the predictions that the website 538, Nate Silver, the statistician, runs that website, and he predicted that, and I just reported it, that Biden would sweep the South, except Texas. And so that was predicted. Yet Biden did take Texas also. So it was predicted by Nick Silver at 538 that Biden would sweep the South. And that just changed. And he did sweep the South, and also he got Texas. So that just changed the entire trajectory of the race. Because before that, they were saying that, Biden can't make it. It's not going to happen. He's a loser. We feel sorry for the guy. It looks like Sanders is going to get the Democratic nomination. Yes, this is what folks thought. Well, now that complete, in a time frame of 72 hours or something, or a couple of days, that has been completely blown out of the water. Now it looks like Biden will definitely get the nomination. In fact, the predictions at 538, that website that makes prognostications based on statistics, says that Biden has, I think, a 96% chance, give or take, of getting the Democratic nomination. And you see, when all the folks dropped out, Klobuchar and who else dropped out? Warren hasn't endorsed anyone yet, but Klobuchar. Who else dropped out? Buttigieg and Beto O'Rourke dropped out a long time ago. But those three, Buttigieg, Klobuchar, and Beto, endorsed Biden. And then also other establishment Democrat folks started to come in and endorse. It seems like a foregone conclusion. The issue is this. The establishment clearly, the Democratic establishment clearly wants Biden to go up against Trump. I think it would have been a better debate, debate between Trump and Sanders, because I'd like to see that debate between capitalism, that debate between capitalism and socialism. That would be interesting. People would learn. It would be interesting. We know what we're going to get with Biden. The thing about the Democrats is that they lean left. Yeah, they're for Medicare for all and all those other, and climate change and for open borders and all that left stuff. Right? All that left-wing stuff, all that stuff that is not good for America, open borders, but they're not so vocal about it. They're sort of like on the down low, so to speak. They're kind of, it's like they sneak it in. As I said before, everything's a slippery slope with Democrats. But Sanders is much more vocal or externalized about his positions. He makes it clear, his positions. He says he's a Democrat socialist, but basically he's a socialist. And I mentioned before, it's not just Medicare for all, but it's free college and free child care and free this and free that. Everything's free. And he's not a very good economist. In fact, I saw him this evening with Chris Wallace. Today I saw him with Chris Wallace, and he was bragging about how young folks, how the young are flocking to love him. The young love Sanders. Well, that's not something to brag about. because the young lack experience and wisdom. And we should not, our policy should not be dictated by what the young think. They don't have the experience. They're not able to foresee what's coming down the pike if we go this way, right? Another thing worth mentioning is the fact that during Super Tuesday, they said the young didn't turn out as well as they did during the 2016 campaign. And I thought no one has mentioned this, but I'm thinking maybe because of Brexit and maybe because of the walkaway movement. You know, the Turning Point USA folks are going to the college campuses and educating the folks about the disaster, about the illusion that liberal ideology is a good thing. Turning Point USA is going to many college campuses and informing the folks. So maybe young folks' turnout during Super Tuesday was not as high as 2016 is because of Brexit and the walkaway movement. Yes, no one has mentioned that. In fact, they don't give it any kind of, I don't see it mentioned in the media at all. Not the mainstream media, Brexit and the walkaway movement. I think that those are significant movement and it's impactful, at least on social media. The other thing that Sanders talked about in his interview with Chris Wallace is this idea of income inequality. He says I think this is what he said, income inequality for the last 45 years has exacerbated. It has gotten worse. And wages have remained suppressed or stagnant. You don't see wages going up over the last 45 years. This is what he said. Well, we all know the reason that is, right? The reason why that is because subsequent to the Immigration Act of 1965, starting in the 70s and going into the 80s and definitely the 90s, that's going about, getting in the 80s is going about 45 years. That's when illegal aliens were taking jobs of Americans and suppressing wages. There's a direct correlation. And yet Sanders wants open borders. So, Sanders is not really good at economics. If we didn't have, in California, or rather Los Angeles, I've mentioned this before, I've said this a billion times, we have 1.3 million at least illegal aliens. And when I had the building inspector on, remember, I've said this a billion times before, he said that 80 to 90% of the construction jobs were held by illegal aliens. So we know illegal aliens are working jobs that Americans want, despite the fact that Democrats told us for years in the mainstream media that illegal aliens they don't call them illegal aliens, they call them what? Undocumented immigrants, but they're illegal aliens. The Democratic Party and talking heads had said for years that illegal aliens do jobs that Americans don't want to do. Well, we know that's a lie. You notice they don't say that anymore. The left always has a meme or a narrative that they repeat repeatedly until people start to believe it. And that's what I think I'd like to title today's show, The Media, Our Culture. How the media has how the media has a detrimental effect on the culture. I've talked about this before, and in fact, in my interview with the Epoch Times, I talked about this notion, how it started with free sex feminism. LBJ's Great Society and free sex feminism destroyed the family, okay? It destroyed the black family, and it destroyed all American families. Because when you have free sex feminism means women can have sex and sexual relations with whoever they want to have sexual relationships with, whenever, however they want to, whenever, without getting a commitment from the man, without getting a commitment of marriage. And therefore, that's why everything everything that is wrong in society, in our culture, is because of liberal ideology. So our families are broken because free sex feminism means you don't have to get a commitment from the man before you get involved sexually with the man. And therefore women end up having children without having a husband. That is a problem. And Larry Elder talks about this on his show. Having fatherless homes leads to what? Poverty. Having fatherless homes leads to what? Boys growing up without a male role model, getting that Yoda training, which Judge Joe talked about on the show, getting that Yoda training and being sort of disassociated or being alienated from society. Not being able to be focused on what is important. Not keeping your eyes on the prize, not even knowing what the prize is, right? And in fact, Dr. Claude Anderson talked about, or was it Joe? Yeah, it was Dr. Claude Anderson, I think. Or no, it was Judge Joe Brown, mentioned that in all families, all American families, in a certain age cohort, it's like over 50% are over 50%, I forgot the exact percentage, are having children out of wedlock. This is detrimental to American culture. This is detrimental. The father is a necessary element to a family. It is a necessity. It must be. And you notice that the Democrats never talk about this issue. They never bring it up. There's always some disconnect. Sanders is not going to get the Democratic nomination, and young folks aren't going out and voting, at least at the same numbers that they did in the 2016 campaign because of what? I believe Brexit and Turning Point USA and Walkaway. Young folks are waking up to the fact that the liberal ideology has had 6 decades of utter failure. There's some folks in social media that believe socialism is a good thing, but these folks are misinformed and they're not knowledgeable. They're not getting enough information. The problem with the media and politicians is that they present everything in an isolated fashion or in a vacuum. They never provide context. And I think context is very important. Because if you have context, then you're able to see what works and what doesn't work. It's results that matter. And in fact, Mark Levin had Robert Woodson on Life, Liberty, and Levin this evening. You guys know that Robert Woodson has been a guest on this show twice, and I'd like to have him back on. So they were talking about, and I will reach out to him to be back on because this is an interesting thing. They're talking about how the New York Times and academicians are pushing this 1691 project. This 1691 project. And you know, they use Black Americans to destroy. Black Americans are always used as a, what is the word? Cudgel, or a sort of a bullwhack. Is that the word? Am I using it properly? Black Americans are always used as sort of like a springboard to get the destruction of America going. Do you know does that make sense? We're always used as a reason why you should be angry. Why, and they use slavery. Why slavery is, in fact, that's what the 1691 project says. I think it's 1619 project. Or it's maybe 60, I can't remember, 1691. Yeah, it's 1691. When they're saying the original sin is slavery. See, they've been ringing this bell forever. It's the same thing forever. In other words, America has not changed since 1619 or 1691, whichever it is. I can't remember. America has not evolved since the 1600s. America has not redeemed herself by having a civil war since the 1600s. Nothing has changed. Everything is the same since her original sin of slavery. That's what this 1619 project is saying. And the New York Times is highlighting this project naturally. Well, Robert Woodson was on with Life, Liberty, and Levine tonight, this evening. And he has a project now, the 1776 project, that is going to be a counterbalance to the 1619 project. I think it's important. This is what is important, to always have a counterbalance, an impulse, to get the full picture. And this is what how the media, the mainstream media, MSNBC, CNN, have failed. Because they never offer a counterbalance. They never offer the full picture. They only offer one side, and they're relentless with pumping that one side. You never get the other perspective, because there is another perspective to the original sin being slavery of America. Yeah. What is the other perspective? Well, yeah, there was a civil war fought to stop slavery. The letters and the second inaugural address, that 700-word speech of Abraham Lincoln, right? And the writings of the founding fathers. There are many, these will give you a more nuanced perspective of what was going on during the 1600s and 1700s. And the 1800s. You need a more nuanced perspective. And something that Robert Woodson discussed was the fact that he brought up Biddy Mason. I always bring up Biddy Mason. But there were many slaves that once they left slavery became millionaires. In fact, I think Robert Woodson is going to do a book on that. He mentioned that when he was a guest on the show. There were many slaves after slavery became millionaires. In fact, Dr. Claude Anderson mentions that after slavery, black Americans owned I've mentioned this before, more than 200 million acres of land right after slavery. So this is giving the full picture. This is giving the full perspective of how things evolve. Life is a process. It's an evolution, but we're now going backwards now with the Sanders business. We've been here before. We've gone over socialism and communism and all that stuff before. It's not like this is the first time. So Sanders is sort of like stuck in his college days, and he can't move forward. He can't get out. It's like, help, I'm stuck. But getting back to this project, someone contacted me. I think it was Professor Wilford Wiley wanted me to get involved with the project. I'd like to get involved. And Professor Robert Woodson talked about folks getting involved at the ground level, activists getting involved. And I think it's important that a counter narrative is provided by black Americans. You see, liberals use black Americans to justify people's hate for America. To justify, there was slavery, therefore you should hate America. Oh, there was slavery, therefore America's original sin is I think Mark Levin said, it's like in the DNA of America, hate and racism and white supremacy is in the DNA of America. What does that mean in the DNA of America? Meaning it's there. And this is when folks talk about white supremacy, this is what they're saying. And this is something Dr. Frances Cress Wellesley said. She says white supremacy is permeating all aspects of American society, sports, entertainment, law, politics, media. It's everything. White supremacy. That was her theory, Dr. Frances Cress Wellesley. And in fact, Dr. Frances Cress Wellesley is the woman who she's a psychiatrist, she popularized the term white supremacy. She got the term initially from Neely Fuller, but it was a mere theory, okay? It's a mere theory. It's not something that is a fact, what is quantitative, that you can measure. And in fact, even though she proposed that theory, which Dr. Amos Wilson disagreed with, because his position, he was also a psychiatrist. Both Dr. Amos Wilson and Dr. Frances Cress Wellesley have passed, but you can watch their videos and learn their thinking and their ideas on YouTube, because many of their lectures, if not all, are uploaded on YouTube. So that's Dr. Frances Cress Wellesley and Dr. Amos Wilson. And Dr. Amos Wilson disagreed with Dr. Frances Cress Wellesley's theory about white supremacy. So this is how you get a full picture of something. You get the full idea. You have Dr. Frances Cress Wellesley on one side, and then you have Dr. Amos Wilson on another side. Both psychiatrists giving us a theory about what's going on in America. And you get the full picture, and then you're able to examine it in an intelligent way. Examine it in an intelligent way, in an insightful way, in a critical way. Dr. Amos Wilson said, listen, his position was this, if it's not, I don't care what her theory is, if it's not putting money, real wealth in the pockets of black men who have to head households, it's meaningless. It's irrelevant, because we live in a society where people must have real wealth to be healthy, impactful, to make a difference. American society is based on the middle class. We live in a capitalist society. Therefore, the more black American middle class folks that we have, families that we have, it's a good thing. It's better. But no, we're going backwards now. Despite the fact for 6 decades we've been hanging on, black Americans have been voting for the Democratic Party for 6 decades. We're going backwards, and we're facing zero median wealth by 2053. So these problems enable the fact that black Americans are a problem in America's society since the 1600s. This is how the left, the Democrats and leftists and liberals shape the narrative. Black Americans are a problem in American society, and they have been since the 1600s. And they're a problem in American society because American society has racism / white supremacy in her DNA. And therefore, it is us, the saviors of black America and the saviors of America, that we Democrats are going to excise America from racism. We're going to cut racism out of American society like it's a cancer. And Sanders, because Sanders did say racism is up and down. Here we are in 2020, right? Here we are in 2020, and Sanders is saying racism is up and down all through American society. It's seeping out of her pores. This is the position that Democrats take, and it requires a Democrat to save America from this cancer, this boil that needs to be lacerate a boil? It takes a Democrat to solve it. But see, this is wrong-headed, because we know black Americans were doing much better. We had more families in the 20s and 30s than white families. Two-parent families. More two-parent families in the 20s and 30s, when there was 25% unemployment rate in the 30s, than white Americans. These are the facts that this is the full story that people must know. The American people must know. Anyway, I hear my music, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Next Truth Report. I'm your host, Kethleen Wells. And I was just talking about this 1619. Is it 1619? Yeah, it is 1619, yes. Project 1619 project that the New York Times is pushing. It's going to be all in the schools and everything. And Dr. Robert Woodson has a counterbalance to that, the 1776 project. You can go to the Woodson Center, his website, and check it out. So this is how the media and the academicians, listen, the left has permeated our culture in a negative way. And they destroy our culture, and then the Democrats say, oh, this is destroyed, this is going bad, this isn't going well, this is a bad thing, let us fix it. But they're the ones that have destroyed it. Do you see what I'm saying? Democrats are the ones, with free sex feminism, they destroy the family. Not having the father in the family means that the income disparity will be greater because it's necessary to have a man head the household and bring in the income for the family. Single women, this is too much. Single women are more likely to be poverty-stricken than married women. And the statistics are stark, actually. Another thing I wanted to mention is how the media is shaping, and this is tied into the same thing, it shapes our culture. It has an influence. It shapes our culture, actually. Because we wouldn't be saying people of color but for the media. But for the left, but for the talking heads on the left. We wouldn't be saying people of color. Do you understand that? And so you just pick up everything they say and you repeat it. It becomes mainstream. It becomes par for the course. People of color. The other thing, illegal aliens. They're illegal aliens, but they told us to say illegal immigrants are undocumented workers. The left, the media, kept saying that. They kept saying, oh, they're undocumented workers. Oh, they're undocumented workers. They're illegal immigrants. They're not immigrants. You're not an immigrant if you come to the country illegally. But this is how they changed the definitions. They changed the definitions. They changed the meaning of words. And this other thing, diversity. That's a misleading term because it's superficial diversity if you have people who are of different gender or different race, but they have the same ideas or ideology of everyone else. So in other words, everyone on the Democratic ticket, although there was diversity when you had Cory Booker and Andrew Yang and Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren, you had and Amy Klobuchar, you had gender diversity and you had race diversity, but they all had the same ideas basically. So it's superficial diversity. We need to stop doing that. They're all Americans, and they have, even though they're different genders, they have the same ideas, so it's not diverse. If you have the same idea, it's not diversity. That's why we need to start redefining. They have control of the language. They shape the narrative. I said that 1,000 times. Anyway, Larry Elder has a video up on YouTube on the Larry Elder Show. It's an excellent one. And Robert Woodson also pointed this out. If racism / white supremacy is in the DNA of America, how did Don Lemon become a millionaire? And Van Jones and Michael Eric Dyson and Mark Lamont Hill and Joanne Reed? If racism is in the DNA of America, how did we get President Obama? Why doesn't Michael Eric Dyson and Cornel West teach some of these young guys without fathers how to become millionaires like them? Instead of beating up young girls, you see those young kids who were beating up that young girl in Brooklyn? That was released. That went viral. It was a bunch of boys, young teenage boys, 14, 15, 16 years old, beating up one girl. It was like 10 boys surrounding one girl. She was on the ground. They're like beating her up, kicking her. Can you imagine? And I bet you not one of those boys has a father. That's the problem. I'm sure not one of those boys has a father. That's the problem. And they never discuss the problem with the family. They never bring up the fact that free sex feminism destroyed our families. And when you have not two parents, a mother and a father, you're lost. You have no values. You have no standards. And you end up beating up a girl, a teenage girl, kicking her on the ground in Brooklyn in broad daylight. How absurd is that? I know not one of those boys had a father. Because a father instills, a boy who has a father would know better. than to do that. He would know that that's wrong, that you don't hit women, you don't kick them, and you don't steal. If there's a beef, you talk it out or something. But you don't get into a boy doesn't get into a physical altercation with a girl. Fathers teach, it's not noble, it's not courageous, it's cowardly, it's sissified. You're like being like a girl. That was ridiculous. And I feel like the black community is always used as this is something that Robert Wilson mentioned. When you say that racism is in the DNA of America, and that's what they're saying with this 1619 project. When the slaves, I think it was 20 or 30 slaves came over in 1619 in Virginia. And that started America. That's how America was started. When slaves, 20 or 25 slaves came to America, came to Virginia as African slaves came as chattels. That started chattel slavery, and that is in the DNA of America. That's what this 1619 project is stating. And so nothing has happened since then, right? But when you say that, you're doing a disservice to black Americans. You're telling black Americans there's no need to compete. There's no need to be involved to become business owners. There's no need to better yourself because racism is in the DNA of America. There's no need to get educated. There's no need to embrace standards and values. There's no need to get married before you have children because racism is in the DNA of America. You will be a perpetual victim in America because racism is in her DNA. You can never achieve anything. You will never succeed in America as a black person because racism is in the DNA of America. That's what these people at the 1619 Project are telling black Americans. They're telling us we cannot win, that we should not even try, we should not compete, that it's hopeless, that it's useless for us to do anything. And so we can go around and, beating up young girls. Teenage boys can go around beating up young girls because racism is in the DNA of America. You can have children out of wedlock. You don't have to get married. You can have sex with 1,000 men and don't ask for a commitment because why? Racism is in the DNA of America. You can have 20 children without a husband and get on welfare. Why? Because racism is in the DNA of America. You don't have to finish high school because why? Racism is in the DNA of America. Anyway, let me take a call now from Mike in El Segundo. Hi, Mike. Welcome to the Naked Truth Report.
Thank you, Kathleen. That's just a wonderful monologue you've done. It's just awesome. You've hit so many important points. It's incredible. I'd like to touch on a point about supremacism and how the Democrat Party and politicians and the activists in the Democrat fake news media keep falsely accusing people like us of being white supremacists, meaning conservatives, Republicans, people who are pro-liberty, pro-Constitution. And yet, as you know, the Democrat Party is and always has been the white supremacist party from the time they fought the Civil War against the Republican states to keep slavery, to the time when they created the Ku Klux Klan as a terror wing of the Democrat Party, right on up through Jim Crow, including Jim Crow gun control, poll taxes, you name it. And now the Democrat Party has adopted Marxism, which is probably one of the ultimate supremacist ideologies. Supremacists to the point that they mass murdered more than 145 million civilians in the last century. So, and then also, the Democrat Party is basically in bed with Islamist extremists, and Islam is another genocidal supremacist ideology right there up with Marxism.
Right, and they always use the Southern, this is what they do today, the Democrats today. They say that the Southern strategy was implemented during the 60s, I think, and that the Democrats during the Dixiecrats during the switched parties and became Republicans. But we learned from Dinesh D'Souza that less than 1% switched parties during that so-called Southern strategy. In other words, the Southern strategy is actually a myth. It didn't happen.
It is a myth.
Yeah.
It's a defensive myth. The Democrats create all of these total fictions to cover up that they are all the bad things they falsely accuse Republicans and conservatives of. They accuse us of being racist, they're the racists. They accuse us of being greedy, they're the greedy ones. They claim that if you want to keep most of the money that you earned and worked hard for, you're greedy, but they are not greedy for wanting to take it or effectively steal it from you, but have government do it for them so they have plausible deniability. That's what socialism is, in my opinion. Socialism is stealing from your fellow citizens with plausible deniability because you had government do it for you.
Mm-hmm. Well, history, this is why it's important to not view things in isolation or in a vacuum. This is why it's important to know history. And this is why the school system, the public school system, has failed American students, because they're not teaching the accurate history.
Well, the worse than failing the American system. The American schools have done a lot of harm, actually. Like, for example, the El Segundo Unified School District, for many years, they've been teaching El Segundo students that they're world citizens, not American citizens. I've seen students come out and say publicly that they're proud to be, that they're world citizens, which is really totally absurd. It's anti-American. So does that mean they're citizens of Saudi Arabia? They think that women should have no rights and non-Muslims should have no rights, and that men should beat their wives if they fear that their wives may leave them or disobey them. That's right out of Islam's Quran.
Right. This is Marxist ideology also. Marxism was like, you shouldn't disintegrate the family, and so that the individual is loyal to the state.
Exactly. That's why the Democrats keep pushing for, they want so-called free nursery school. They want everything, first of all, it's not free, of course, we the taxpayers pay for it, but they also, I think, passed a law already in the California State Legislature to increase the number of hours that students have to be in kindergarten. In other words, they want the government to rip infants, young children, out of their mother's arms, put them into the Democrat-run Marxist indoctrination camps called schools, and indoctrinate them ultimately to even hate their own parents if they value freedom and if they value Judeo-Christian principles.
Well, I think that Turning Point USA and Candace Owens and all those folks are having an impact. They're traveling the country, talking to students, college students, and I think they're having an impact, because I think it's no coincidence that young voters didn't turn out in the numbers they turned out in 2016. What do you think?
That's very interesting. That may explain, actually, why the Democrats are trying to lower the voting age to 16. They already have two bills pending in the state legislature to lower the voting age to age 17, which would include, of course, high school students that would be indoctrinated and pressured to vote Democrat, to register and vote Democrat by their school teachers. Their school teachers would then harvest their ballots in the classrooms, actually, under the other changes Democrats made to the law. And also, I think most people don't know this, but the Democrats about 4 or 5 years ago, they changed the state election law to allow 16-year-olds in California to pre-register to vote. And then on their 18th birthday, the computer system will automatically update their pre-registration to a full active registration. So this allows the unionized socialist school teachers, the Marxist school teachers, to be able to get their students in high school all pre-registered to vote as Democrats, and then as soon as they turn 18, get them to use vote-by-mail ballots, and like I said, help them vote left-wing Democrat, and then harvest their ballots and make sure they get turned in.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe
the Democrats, by the way, have been making a lot of changes in California. I'm sure they're doing this nationwide to the election laws to basically establish themselves eventually as a nationwide supermajority party, and to strengthen their supermajority in California, their stranglehold they have on the citizens here. And this is what emerging dictatorships do. They start by changing the election laws, making it easier and easier to commit fraud and steal elections. And then once they have total power, they either do away with the elections altogether, or they do like Iran, where they have to approve you to be on the ballot, or in some other way, they just have elections that are fake, but just for show.
Mm-hmm. Well, wasn't the elections in California this Super Tuesday different I didn't vote. I didn't vote. I didn't think it was.
Let me tell you, it's totally different. In fact, if I wanted to, I could have easily voted 50 or more times and had my votes get counted, and they wouldn't even know who it was doing the votes.
Because you could go in.
I actually went down to the county clerk's office in Norwalk. I even took photos of their 24-hour vote center there. They had to let me do. And you just cannot take pictures of anyone's individual ballot or their personal information or forms, but you could take pictures of the room and, of the machines and all that. So I did that. I asked a bunch of questions. It turns out their voting machines are not linked over the internet to their main center in Norwalk. So if someone goes to a vote center and votes, there's no indication that they already voted at the other vote centers. So they can just hop on a bus. They could have busloads of fraudulent voters, take them from vote center to vote center to vote center, and just keep voting. And they can vote under names of people who are registered to vote but never vote. This is why the Democrat Party wants to have mandatory voter registration, and they already have opt-out voter registration, like through Motor Voter at the DMV. Because the more people you register to vote who don't want to vote and are not going to vote, the easier it is to have greater numbers of people voting fraudulently in their names.
So, in other words, now we have voting centers, so you can go anywhere to vote. Is that how that works?
Right. It used to be you would vote in your own city, in your own neighborhood, your own community. And it used to be they would hire people to man the polls that were from the community that they knew.
Right.
Their neighbors. Like when I go to vote, people knew who I was. They'd greet me by name. And if someone suspicious came in, it would be obvious that there's something wrong there. But the way it is now, you can vote anywhere at any vote center in Los Angeles County. And like I said, you can vote as many times as you like. And since you can vote in someone else's name, and they won't take your ID if you offer it to them. They will not ask for ID if you offer to show it. They don't want to see it.
Oh, they don't even, but how is that so? How does it work? In other words, all your information is on the computer?
Yeah, what they do is they download the voter database, the information, the computers at the vote center. So they do that when they set the vote centers up. And I'm not sure, they might update it once a day manually. I doubt they even do that. But points still, they're not interconnected over the internet. So that means that, like I said, that when someone votes at one vote center, all the other vote centers in the county don't know that person voted.
Oh.
So, and since someone can vote in someone else's name, you don't need ID. That means they can vote, like I said, in the name of people who never vote. And that's easy to get because the voter registration database, including the data on who voted or did not vote in each election, that's available to all the campaigns and to anyone who's doing research on it. So that data is available to the Democrat Party. So they can have a list of all the voters who do not vote, which is a longer list than the voters who are registered who do vote. Mm-hmm. So they can easily hand out lists of names and addresses for people to say, here, go vote in these names, and just go from vote center to vote center.
Right.
You can have buses taking
I get you.
from center to center. I mean, I'm telling you, the Democrats have been intentionally opening up our election system to have easier and easier fraud to steal elections.
Mm-hmm.
And there's only one reason they're doing that.
Because
they steal elections.
Well, and they need, Democrats are motivated by power and control. That's it.
Exactly. The Democrat Party and politicians, and all their allies, they are addicted to power like a crack cocaine addict is addicted to crack cocaine. That is why you have Trump derangement syndrome. That is why the Democrats, including those in the media, went totally ballistic. They went crazy when Trump got elected because they knew they were losing some of their power. And they were going through withdrawal pains, just like a addicted drug addict going through severe withdrawal pains.
Okay, Mike, thanks for calling in. I'm glad you're a listener. You're a consistent listener to the Naked Truth Report. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate all my consistent listeners, Truth Warriors and Mythbusters. I really appreciate it. As I said, I'm going to get involved in that 1776 project, and I'll also have Robert Woodson on again. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that Elizabeth Warren, is this what I wanted to mention, or was there something else? Elizabeth Warren felt that the reason why she lost or why she didn't win was because of sexism. Mm-hmm. You see what has happened? You see? It's a no-win situation with Democrats. It's a no-win situation. Anyway, there's my music. Tuesday is going to be Michigan, they will vote a primary again. And 538, which is the website where they prognosticate, the statistician Nick Silver has predicted that Sanders is going to lose Michigan too on Tuesday. Anyway, we'll be back next week and we'll talk about the primary. Yeah. And maybe some other stuff. Maybe I'll ask Robert Woodson to come on. Thank you for listening, Truth Warriors and Mythbusters. I'm glad you came on board the Naked Truth Report. See you next week. Thanks. Bye.